Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far, and you've had a wonderful weekend. Happy Monday. Happy brand new start to the week. You guys know how much I love my Mondays. I've been particularly in a great mood because I brought home a little kitten. I've been working on a project out on a farm that my aunt is staying at, and there was a wild cat who had two kittens. So my aunt and little cousins took the kittens in and have been taking care of them, and I just fell in love with this one kitten. Anyways, I'm in the midst of trying to convince my father to let me keep her around for a little bit while I'm still living under this roof until I'm able to get on my own feet again. But yeah, there's a little life update for you. I have been just super happy hanging around with my little kitten. It's definitely been putting me in a good mood. So I'm super excited to be here, like I always am. But I'm just in an extra good mood because I have a little kitten running around these days. And kittens obviously just put you in a good mood, right? Anyways, okay, so there's a little life update for you I wanted to throw in there. Let you know I'm feeling good, so I hope you're feeling good. But don't worry if you're not feeling terrific or as terrific as I am, because maybe you don't have a cute, adorable kitten running around your bedroom. I am back with more feel-good, positive stories to share with you. They are going to uplift you. They will make you feel good. I've got lots of good ones. I got some new studies. I got some positive things about the pandemic, which is always exciting. Some environmental stories, all those fun things that I love to throw into these episodes to kind of hit a soft spot for anybody and everybody. I try to find at least, one story that just someone can relate to, someone will uplift, it'll uplift them, whatever the case is. So with that being said, lots of good ones to start. And if you saw social media today, you would have seen the post I made for today's episode about my first story that I'm going to share with you. It is a new study that came out, and it says performing acts of kindness can boost both physical health and happiness levels. This is this new study that came out and says, according to this new research, it was just published by the American Psychological Association. It says, not all good-hearted behavior is equally beneficial to the giver. So the strength of the link depends on many factors, including the type of kindness, the definition of well-being, and the giver's age, gender, and other demographic factors. But they're saying that, cooperation, trust, and compassion are all things that are necessary ingredients of, a well-functioning society. They say it is part of the shared culture of humankind, and our analysis shows that it also contributes to mental and physical health. So previous studies have suggested that people who engage in more pro-social behavior are happier and have better mental and physical health than those who don't spend as much time helping others. But not all studies have found evidence for that link, and the strength of the connection kind of varies quite widely in the research literature. So to better understand what drives that variation, there was some research, experts here. The lead author his name is Bryant Hu. He's a research assistant professor at the University of Hong Kong. So him and some of his team, his colleagues, performed a meta-analysis of 201 independent studies, basically comprising of 198,000 total participants, and they looked at the connection between pro-social behavior and well-being. So overall, they found that there was a modest link between the two. Although the effect size was small, it is still quite meaningful, and according to him, given how many people perform acts of kindness every day, plays a role in that as well. So he says more than a quarter of Americans volunteer. A modest effect size can still have a significant impact at a societal level when many people are participating in the behavior. And then they dug deeper into the research, and this was just published in the Psychological Bulletin. Him and his colleagues found that random acts of kindness, such as helping an older neighbor carry groceries, were more strongly associated with overall well-being than formal pro-social behavior, so like a scheduled volunteering for a charity. And this may be because informal helping is more casual and spontaneous, and it may easily lead to forming social connections. And then informal giving is also more varied and less likely to become stale or monotonous. They also found that women showed stronger relationships between pro-sociality and several measures of well-being compared with men. This is just kind of perhaps women are more stereotypically expected to be more caring and giving, and then, thus derive a stronger sense of good feelings for acting in accordance with those social norms. And then the researchers found that studies that were specifically designed to measure the connection between pro-sociality and well-being showed a stronger link between the two than studies that analyze data from other large surveys not specifically designed to study the topic. So researchers might also examine whether more pro-sociality is always a good thing, or whether there is an ideal level of pro-sociality beyond which, there's too much kindness and giving become kind of detrimental to the giver. So there you go. Pretty fascinating research. Basically, the bottom line of this is continue to do random acts of kindness. Now, I thought I would shine some positive light on the pandemic because you guys know how much I love doing that. So I found this article about a restaurant in Austin that has been making the wittiest pandemic signs just to make people laugh. And so this restaurant is famous for its hilarious signs that kind of just pulls out, so many people have been loving their signs just in general. But now during the COVID-19, this restaurant has been putting up some pretty comical signs. And they've been doing this since the 80s, right? So now they've kind of transformed it into COVID. They obviously kind of adjust it to the times. So they've really been making people laugh, and the social media has been amazing for this restaurant. So it's an Austin-based restaurant. It's called El Arroyo. I hope I'm saying that, Arroyo. So they started to make these comical signs back in the 80s. Now they're kind of adjusting the eras ever since. So I thought I would read some of these comical signs to you that hopefully give you a little positive laugh about the pandemic. So one of them says, "I never imagined I'd go up to the bank teller with a mask on and ask for money." Says, "What if soy milk is just regular milk introducing itself in Spanish?" Have we tried putting 2020 in rice? That's a good one. I like that one. We all think we're smart until we try to turn on someone else's shower. That's true. Just remember, someone out there is quarantined with your ex. In 20 years, our country will be run by people homeschooled by day drinkers. Pretty wild that we used to eat cake after someone had blown on it, ... So there you go. There's some witty, funny signs that this restaurant has put up to put a laugh on people's faces during these crazy, crazy times. It's time for a break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back, I have so many more feel-good stories to share with you, including a story about a 14-year-old girl who just had a huge scientific breakthrough where she won $25,000. but this breakthrough could lead to a COVID-19 cure. So you definitely don't want to miss that. I also have a really cool story about Ikea, how they are buying back used furniture worldwide in this recycling push for Black Friday. I got a story about a nonprofit who is hard at work designing new forest to cure California's wildfire curse. I got another study about special lighting that's helping nursing home residents get better sleep instead of sleep meds. I have a really cool story also about a 7-year-old boy who was bullied, and now he's decided to turn his life around and just shine a bunch of positivity all around. So many good stories coming up for you. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Jo. Okay, we are back ready to share some more feel-good, positive stories with you. My next story for you is about that 14-year-old girl. She just won $25,000 for this scientific breakthrough that could lead to COVID-19 cure. Okay, so with the impact of the pandemic continuing, of course, to spread far and wide, people around the world are waiting for news on a possible treatment for this virus, right? I feel like that's all what we're waiting around for. So this 14-year-old girl, she's from Texas, and she has discovered a molecule that can selectively bind to the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. So binding and inhibiting the viral protein would potentially stop the virus entry into the cell, creating a viable drug target. So she's an 8th grader. Her name is Anika Shebarow, and she has been named the winner of the 2020 3M Young Scientist Challenge, which is America's premier middle school science competition. And as part of her research, she has screened millions of small molecules for drug-likeness properties, ADMET properties, and binding affinities against the spike protein using numerous software tools. So the one molecule with the best pharmacological and biological activity towards the spike protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus was chosen as the lead molecule that can be a potential drug for the effective treatment of COVID-19. She and the 9 other finalists have spent the past few months working with a 3M scientist who acted as a mentor for them and worked one-on-one to transform an idea from concept to physical prototype. So Anika wasn't initially planning on studying coronavirus, but after being stricken with a bad bout of flu last year, she was actually hoping to help find a cure for influenza. But then COVID-19, of course, hit the globe, and she knew that she wanted to focus her attention on that. So for her work looking at spike proteins, she can now proudly call herself America's top young scientist, with the $25,000 gift for her award-winning work. And she's also going to receive a special destination trip, of course, when all the craziness dies down. So it's not about the awards or the trip, she says. She says science is the basis of life and the entire universe, and we have a long way to go to understand it fully. She says, how I develop this molecule further with the help of virologists and drug development specialists will determine the success of these efforts. So there you go. A 14-year-old girl could have just found the cure or the right pathway to a cure for COVID-19. How crazy is that? Okay, now my next story is about IKEA. We might not expect, local entrepreneurs to be the ones who might open a secondhand furniture store, and definitely not the world's largest furniture chain. But of course, we all know the Swedish giant IKEA. Now they are buying back the old IKEA furniture, as long as it's in good condition, and they're offering vouchers up to 50% of the original value. So the deal that's meant to stimulate some circular economy buying during the upcoming Black Friday. It's a veritable feast day for consumers, of course. This will all run in 27 countries. I'm sure you know what Black Friday is. But they say by making sustainable living more simple and accessible, IKEA hopes that the initiative will help its customers take a stand against excessive consumption this Black Friday and in the years to come. They say only non-upholstered items, so like chairs, tables, and bookshelves are eligible for return, and a simple price or quality structure is applied to measure the value, with like new items being worth, of course, 50%, and then good items are worth 40%, and then, further evidence of use decreasing the price further and further, just depending on the quality of the product that you're returning. So the plan is to eventually flip all this old furniture, with each IKEA store having a place where people can be restored, can go for like restored secondhand products if they do desire. So IKEA has stated that anything which cannot be sold will be recycled, and that anyone looking to turn in their old furniture should take it to their local IKEA location fully assembled. So there you have it. And you don't even have to annoyingly disassemble any of your furniture. You just can take it right to your local IKEA store, fully assembled, and either get 50% back or 40% back of your money, or they will recycle it for you, which is pretty awesome. Such a cool thing how one of the largest furniture chains ever is doing something like this. And then they will have a restore kind of secondhand area for people, which is so cool. So there you have it. My next story for you is about a non-profit who is working quite hard. They want to design new forests so that they can cure California's wildfire curse. After recent devastating fires in California, the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, is teaming up with a specialist non-profit forest management organization to re-engineer the typical California forest to be more fire resistant. So of course, for decades in California, forest restoration consisted of planting pine trees like rows of cabbage, right? So the theory behind it was that the sunlight would be especially limited on the forest floor, preventing a flood of grass, shrubs, and weeds from taking over the ground in between the trees. So they say this pines in lines strategy is what they call it. It also created the perfect forest as far as fires were concerned, right? Because it allowed the fires enough fuel to reach the canopies, and then places, in spreads every direction, right? So American Forest is the nonprofit. They are working hard to replant forests in a way that's much more like how many forests existed before the arrival of Europeans. Namely clumps of different kinds of trees, not just pines, and then spaced far enough apart to prevent wildfires from spreading so quickly. This also protects from drought, as these small clumps excluded from the company of other trees by open ground have a greater monopoly on the supply of water that falls from them. And the American Forest has climate-informed projects going in the San Bernardino Mountains, as well as the other towns of Paradise and Concoe, which the campfire destroyed in collaboration with the BLM, the Butte County Fire Safe Council, and the Butte County Resource Conservation District, which includes both public and private lands. So in San Bernardino, the organization is providing 7,500 trees in 2020 and in 2021 to restore fire-damaged forest in the mountains surrounding Los Angeles, and 120,000 trees over the next 2 years in the burn scar of the 2018 campfire. So along with providing habitat for California's rich diversity of wildlife, forests also help to, of course, absorb the sequester of CO2, and the loss of over 4 million acres of forest in the last 3 years by way of fire no less goes a long way towards damaging California's ability to meet CO2 reduction targets, some of which already made back in 2016, right? So over the coming decade, California is now aiming to reduce CO2 emissions to levels of 40% below what they were in 1990, and the burning of so many forests may have actually set the state back behind what it achieved in 2016. So American Forest goes the extra distance now to ensure their forests have the highest degree of survivability, thereby ensuring climate goals can be met and stay met. So one way is by seeking out the trees in forests which have survived disease, fire, or drought, and specifically harvesting their seeds in an attempt to kind of get these new forests with whatever genetic resilience these lucky trees had before. And in order to ensure these strategies don't need to be endlessly repeated, the organization is using modeling to imagine the needs of the trees and the ecosystem they inhabit 30 or even 50 years into the future. So they say it's very common to look at what was there before the fire and just say, let's replace that one for one, try and get the exact same seed, the exact same trees, and replant them. But that doesn't make sense when looking out 30 or especially 60 years from now. So while the COVID-19 shutdowns have limited BLM and Forest Service workers' abilities to get into the fire-damaged areas in California and make plans for the reforestation, American forests are hard at work planting trees and clearing underbush, which is one of the key factors in replant wildfire growth. So there you have it. We could be seeing some new forests around California, hopefully getting rid of that California wildfire curse. Now it's time for another break, but don't you dare to go anywhere. When we get back, I still have that awesome story about a 7-year-old boy who is now is just a shining light of positivity after he's been going through some bad bullying. I also have that story about those special lighting that's helping nursing homes residents get better sleep at night, and a couple other ones that you are not going to want to miss. So stay tuned. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello. Okay, we are back from the break, ready to finish off the last stretch of today's episode with some more feel-good, positive stories to hopefully uplift your Monday or whatever day you are listening to this. I want to set you up for an awesome week or an awesome day, just get you in a good mood. So let's round off today's episode with some good ones. Now, I've mentioned the story about the 7-year-old boy who's doing something quite amazing now after he was bullied. So, Kavanaugh Bell is his name. He is now kind of living his best life ever. After facing bullying at school, rather than internalizing the pain or trying to get even, this 7-year-old boy decided to channel his energy into something very positive instead. So he says, after I was bullied and I felt a darkness inside of me, I knew I didn't want other kids to feel the same way. So I asked my mom if she could help me spread love and positivity. And the more I gave back to my community, the more I wanted to keep doing it. So he lives in Maryland with his mom and their extended family. And even before the bullying incident, this second grade Good Samaritan was already doing his part by trying to give back during the pandemic. So initially he funded by his own savings. He started out by assembling and distributing care packages filled with food and toiletries for his elderly neighbors. And then over time, the popular project really snowballed. So with contributions pouring in, he and his mom launched a food pantry staged in space donated by a local warehouse. And then in the face of the negativity at school, his determination to remain positive only became very, very stronger, hoping to expand his message of compassion beyond the confines of his own community. So he set out to find a place where residents would benefit most from his messages of hope. So spurred by the memories of a 2018 Mount Rushmore road trip that he had taken with his mom that led him through the South Dakota's Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, he knew he found his answer. So he says, my mom explained to me that people live on the reservation and some didn't have what they needed to survive. Some of the houses didn't have electricity or running water. So with a steady stream of in-person donations, as well as some contributions from his GoFundMe page and his Amazon wish list pages, him and his mom have managed to amass enough essential supplies to fill a 53-foot semi-truck, not once, but twice. So his mom used some of the donation funds to hire a driver. She also reached out to Alice Phelps, who is the director of First Families Now, a nonprofit humanitarian organization whose focus is bettering the lives of families and children on the reservation, just to apprise her of her son's plans. Says he believes he can save the world, and I believe him. He just carries that, well, no problem, let's just do it. And he doesn't, see anything as a challenge. So I love that innocence about him. So the first shipment that went out in July was loaded with non-perishable food and cleaning supplies, as well as some shoes, clothing, and diapers. And then with the cold weather approaching, the second shipment in September also included coats and blankets. Says it's just a blessing to be helping them. He says, I'm trying to make sure they have what they need to survive because that's their only land and they're like my family. So in addition to his humanitarian aid work, he also launched his own nonprofit. It's called Cool and Dope, which is an acronym that stands for Considering Others, Obstacles in Life, and Dishing Out Positive Energy. Pretty cool. So the organization's mission is to combat bullying and spread positivity through acts of kindness. Now, he says he hopes to see bullying totally eradicated by his 18th birthday, 10 years from now. So while 2030 may be a decade away, his persistence just might help him reach that goal, they say, and continue to inspire others to live his best life in the process as well. Pretty cool story about a pretty remarkable 7-year-old boy. Can you believe it? We had a crazy cool story about a 14-year-old girl who could have found led to the cure of COVID-19, and now this 7-year-old boy who's just on a mission to change the world. I love it so much. This next one for you now is another study. They're saying that nursing home residents tend to fall asleep at all hours of the day, and during the night, their sleep may be interrupted by periods of wakefulness. So it's a vicious cycle of fragmented sleep that can place residents at risk for poor health outcomes, of course, including depression and just increased frailty and all that kind of stuff, right? So some of these team members identified an an innovative way to cut in half the number of sleep disturbances experienced by residents in one California nursing home, and it didn't involve prescribing sleeping pills. So instead, the facility installed interior lighting fixtures that change color and intensity over the course of the day and the night. One of the colleagues that put this in says, I think it's a pretty novel. The technology continues to evolve, and so one of the reasons we wanted to study these lights was that there hadn't been research done on this kind of lighting. So he kind of led this team of 7 researchers who studied the use of tuned LED lighting at ACC Care Center, which is a 99-bed nursing home in Sacramento, California, and participating in a pilot lighting installation by the Sacramento Municipal Utility District and the U.S. Department of Energy Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. So the team's results that was just published in Seniors Housing and Care Journal just earlier this month established this preliminary data that can be used as providers in the long-term care industry consider the adoption of tuned lighting in other facilities. So prior research had found that nursing home residents likely receive too little light during the day and too much at night. So the researchers randomly assigned corridors where a total of 63 long-term care residents experienced either tuned or static lighting conditions for 2 months, then switched the corridors to the other lighting. So the tuned lighting brightened corridor lighting in the day and dimmed it during the night, and the static condition mimicked the fluorescent lighting in place at the facility prior to the installation of the tunable fixtures, and the study spanned the period of December 2018 through March 2019. So 35 of the 63 residents had been diagnosed with dementia, which is associated, of course, with conditions that include delusions, hallucinations, depression, anxiety, irritability, wandering. So the mean age of residents in the study was 88.3 years old, and 71% of them were women. So the study found that, on average, the residents experienced 3.6 nighttime sleep disturbances with static lighting compared to the 1.8 with tuned lighting. So the results weren't all super surprising, given this research team hypothesized the intervention would have a positive effect on sleep. They say, we do know that there's a relationship between exposure to natural light and to, of course, the body clock rhythm in our body is important for healthy sleep. And they say it's very reasonable to think that this might be a particular problem in this setting and something that we could address through environmental practices. So the study suggests that improving the sleep of even a few residents can have a positive effect on roommates and those in nearby rooms. And many of the residents in the study share rooms of 2 to as many as 4 people. So other research has demonstrated that the sleep habits of roommates can often determine whether a resident has a good night's sleep or not. So tuned lighting systems first appeared on the market back in 2014. They are more expensive than static fixtures because they have more than one color of LED chip inside, allowing for the mixing of warm and cool white. But the cost has decreased as sale volumes has increased. This is now according to a new study. Naomi Miller, who is the senior lighting research scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Portland, Oregon. So nursing homes first turned to these systems primarily for their energy saving feature, but then now, since this new kind of discovery, they consider them a low risk intervention to improve sleep, and one that the long-term care industry should strongly consider at a time when nursing homes are shifting staff time and resources to contend with the coronavirus pandemic. Well, there you have it, another pretty interesting new study. Well, that is all that I have for you for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I so appreciate you being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button, to like and follow us on social media, and as always, leave a 5-star review. Now, Now, remember that first story that I shared with you today. Stay happy, stay positive, and spread kindness every single chance that you get. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.